Hi, my readings and discourse analysis class to a new session. So last time we had an overview on the different models to discourse analysis, and we also presented the two approaches of the functionalist approach and the formalist approach. We actually juxtaposed these two approaches to discourse analysis, and we saw how they differ in terms of their um, focus and their scope. All right, so we saw that the functionalist approach to language would focus more on the functions um, behind discourse, okay, while the formalists would always look more and scrutinize actually the linguistic units, but at the same time they would always relate it actually to social context. All right, then we moved to talk about Schifrin's model uh, to discourse analysis, which is actually quite unique because it is very holistic, as it encompasses features of body language, okay, and dramatization in relation to social context. So it doesn't only study the linguistic units and just relate it to its social context, but it also investigates the hexes or the body language or the sign language of the discourse. This model actually perfectly works for like oral video discourse, such as TV interviews or real life filmed communicative events. All right, especially that she mainly deals with utterances, not with sentences. All right, so many have used this model to analyze, for example, lately Meghan and Harry's interview with Oprah. Okay, so this model was extensively used just to decipher the in between lines of the you know Meghan and Harry's statements. Um the analysis actually, for example, of their interviews was at the level of the reactions of the agents after articulating every utterance, and the dramatization, the way how they uttered every statement, and their body movement and their eye movement. So their facial reactions, these are all actually carried with every utterance, and so they add an impact the overall idea of the utterance and of the discourse actually analyzed here. So it is very interesting actually to look at this kind of model because it's very comprehensive. Maybe it doesn't really like work with uh, you know written, I would say, discourse. It's rather actually targets at a spoken discourse, and for written discourse, we will look at today at Fairclough's model to critical discourse analysis, which is basically the most consumed and used as well as adopted model by many discourse analysts and linguists. So let's have a look at it. So before actually we dive more into the model of normal Fairclough, I think it is of paramount importance just like to have a mini introduction about who is normal Fairclough, because he has been actually contributing to the field of discourse analysis throughout so many years. And so why not like to have like just an idea or a brief account of his career and some of his publications. So, according to Wikipedia, Norman Fairclough is a prominent professor of linguistics at Department of Linguistics and English Language at Lancaster University. He's one of the founders of critical discourse analysis as applied to sociolinguistics. CDA is concerned with how power is exercised through language. And looking at his publications and papers and his, research books, we would find that most of them deal with the relationship between power and language, or language and power. Okay, and so most of his actually studies have been dedicated to the study of, political speeches and political interviews, just to see how many interpretations or readings we may infer from a single text. All right. So, Norman Fairclough actually model has been also modified throughout years. It's like his model, the one that you have in Martin Luther King's speech, "I have a dream," and the PDF file that I sent you last week. Um, the speech has been um, analyzed according to Fairclough Model 1992. But the model that I'm going actually to present to you today is Fairclough's latest model in 1997. Okay, it holds a kind of the same concept and the same notions, but with some modifications of analysis. All right, but it is somehow the same. So, according to Fairclough, discourse analysis is a research method for studying written or spoken language in relation to its social context. And as we have previously explained this, that social context means the history or the culture, or I would say the political circumstances that scene behind the production of any text. So you cannot study a text per se, or you cannot analyze it in terms of its linguistic properties, but you have to account for also the context of the text. So it aims to understand how language is used in real life situations. And what we mean here with real life situations is that we need to investigate those rhetoric tools, or those discursive tools that are used by people in order to persuade them, or in order to build trust, creating doubts, or motivating people, or for example, creating propagandas, as we see now, for example, false news on TV news. All right, so um, this actually happens, and you need to know that every, like, for example, media or a broadcast or every newspaper agency holds a kind of a discourse. Okay, يعني كل وكالة إعلامية أو قناة تنتهج خطابا معين. Okay, so some of these discourses can be, as we say, based on false news, but they still want to propagate their ideologies. All right, so uh, these actually discursive tools are also used, for example, channels like in NBC, I don't know, 4 or 5, where we have those girls trying to sell some things and so on. These channels for um, commercials and so on. I think it's Citrus TV, if I'm not mistaken. They actually use so many tools in order to get people to buy. All right. So if you just like turn on your TV and you watch them, you will find so many, or you will come up with so many comments and notes about the way how they speak, and how what tools, linguistic tools that they do in order to make people encouraged to buy their um, their products. When conducting discourse analysis, one should focus on specific hypotheses or specific research questions. It is not an abrupt process. Now, for example, you have a text to be analyzed. You have to define your questions. What points you want to discuss in the text, because you cannot just study it as a whole, all right? So it's better like to have very definite questions before starting on any kind of a text. For example, to what extent, for example, this text supports women? Okay, so you study the text, the words, the expressions used. So you come up that, for example, this text is very much feminist. This text is working on empowering women. This text is based on so many real examples of successful women, the use of a positive, I would say, expressions and so on. Yeah, okay, so it works like that. Now, discourse analysis is a common qualitative as well as quantitative research method. What do we mean by this? So when you study text, for example, we are not only like concerned with the content, okay? That is a qualitative method. No, we are actually doing also a quantitative method. Like when I study a text and I see certain repetition of expressions, certain repetition of words, of recurrent names mentioned by the speaker. So this actually means something. So I need to count, for example, how many times, for example, the word freedom has been repeated throughout the text, or how many times the pronoun us or we, or you know these pronouns of unity has been repeated throughout the text, because this means something. This is a clue for something. And remember that this type of study and remember that this type of study can be applied to any instance of written or oral language. It can also be applied to paintings. It can also be applied to pieces of sculptures, or so on. Conducting discourse analysis means examining how language functions, how meaning is created, how goals are achieved in different social contexts. As for materials that are suitable for discourse analysis, they include books, newspapers, marketing materials, social media posts, interviews, conversations, political speeches as well. Now, by analyzing all these types of discourse, researchers aim to gain an understanding of social groups and how they communicate, and what rhetorical techniques works best with people. All right, so for example, how do TV channels broadcast news? What do they do in order to attract people, in order to build a trust, in order to add a sense of credibility in their news? It could be false news, but you still can believe them, all right? So this is actually all done by these, for example, broadcasting institutions or newspaper agencies, by writers who write history books and so on. Okay, so discourse analysts try to find out the kind of linguistic, I would say, devices in relation to the context, that is the political, social, cultural context of the text. Now, you might actually ask a question like, how is discourse analysis different from other methods such as stylistics? Because this is so much like similar. Now, unlike linguistic approaches that focus only on the rules of language use, discourse analysis emphasizes the contextual meaning of language. It focuses on the social aspects. You know that in varieties, you have studied many texts, but we never like discussed the content of the text or the social aspects or properties or elements, the cultural elements found in the text. But in readings and discourse analysis, we try actually to a kind of melange between these two aspects, that is the linguistic aspects and the contextual aspects, in one piece of analysis. All right, so it focuses on the social aspects of communication and the way people use language to achieve specific effects. All right, so instead of focusing on smaller units of language such as sounds, morphemes, or words or phrases, discourse analysis is used to study larger chunks of language, such as entire conversations, texts. Okay, remember, it goes beyond a sentence. Linguistic phenomena reflect social phenomena. What does he mean by this when Fairclough says this very famous kind of um, statement? So Fairclough argues that language and society are related. In simple terms, linguistic phenomena reflect social phenomena, and also the other way around. For example, if there wasn't racism, we wouldn't have words such as Negro. If there wasn't slavery, there wouldn't exist words such as slavery. So every social phenomena، أي ظاهرة اجتماعية تعكس ظاهرة لغوية، أو أي ظاهرة لغوية تعكس ظاهرة اجتماعية ما. Alright? For example, if you currently use the word Negro for any dark-skinned person, you might actually be sentenced. You might go to jail. But 200 years, if you say this, it would be fine, okay? Because the system of slavery existed like in America at the time, and it was so normal. It was so okay to call, a dark-skinned person a Negro. But nowadays, the social habits have changed. The culture or the mainstream culture have also changed. If you say Negro to a person now, this person might put you into jail. Okay, so things are changing. So every linguistic, so the word is extremely derogatory in modern usage, and there are many words alike. So every linguistic phenomenon reflects a social, cultural, and historical phenomenon as well. The existence, for example, of foreign terms in Libyan dialect. What do they say or what do they suggest? These reflect a kind of a history that was, under a kind of colonialism, a kind of, an imperial effect of these, you know, uh, colonial powers. So the existence or the sheer existence of foreign terms in Libyan dialect reflects the history of the nation. It raises the question of how these words came and infiltrated within the dialect. So, as you know, that Libya was colonized by the Turks, the Italians, and so this actually says something, okay, about the existence also of the Amazigh vocabulary and some Hebrew words. Uh, it says something about the history and the culture. We know that there have been so many studies that were conducted in this field, and so many people, like, they have found out that the effect of, for example, the Amazigh culture and Hebrew culture have been tremendous on the Libyan dialect. Many words, such as, for example, khnab or yikhnab. Okay, this word is we think like this is an Arabic word, but this word is basically a Hebrew word, that the Jews used to live in Libya, and so many words have been, adopted from the language. Now let's talk about the model. Fairclough Model 1997 developed a model called critical discourse analysis. According to Fairclough, the critical discourse analysis on a text is important in order to be able to explain the relationship between language, ideology, and identity. He argues that critical study of text and discourse can help in terms of uncovering the unseen agenda which may be hidden from lay people. Okay, so we see like how um, knowledge and power, people who have knowledge, who can use language um, with knowledge, they have the power, okay, and they can achieve dominance, and they might actually exercise inequality and bias on lay people. Moreover, he also suggests that discourse can be found in the socio-cultural practices at different stages. It could be at personal level, reflects a person's point of view, or at institutional level, okay, that reflects a company, business, establishment, or a government, and a societal level, a society at a large scale, or as communities as well. Now, when you analyze a text um, in discourse analysis, you have to look at dimensions, as Fairclough calls them, three dimensions, ثلاثة أبعاد, all right? So first of all, we have the linguistic properties. Now, this is the first dimension, text, okay? And then the second dimension is themes. The fourth dimension is context. Now, in text, you look at the linguistic properties of the text. All right, you see the genre of the text. Is the text what, a newspaper article? Is it a political speech? Is it a TV interview? Is it a song? Is it a poem? Is it a chapter from a book, a piece from a narrative, and so on? Then, once you are done with, investigating the text in terms of its genre, also in terms of like the kind of verbs used, the nouns, what the style of the text in general, then you move on to talk about the themes. Okay, what's the topic in discussion? All right, so maybe first of all you talk about the text, the linguistic properties of the text, and then uh, the thematic side of the text. So, what are the themes in discussion in this text? Does this text talk about feminism? Does it talk about child, rights? Does it talk about education? Does it talk about, you know, um, does it talk about racism? Um, is it about fundraising? Is it about, trying to promote a kind of commercial stuff and so on? Then you go on with the context of the text. You study the history, you study the society, the culture of the text. So, in fact, the analysis of any text requires two main, I would say, assets. It requires linguistic knowledge, and it also requires a kind of intellect on the part of the analyst, the person to analyze. If you are a person of I don't know, of no, I would say, reading, of no culture, of you know, you are unaware of history and cultures and so on, the process or the task is going to be really challenging. But if you are a person who is acquainted with what is going on in the world, you like to make research, you are aware about the history and the culture of different countries and so on. Now the process must be facilitated in this way. Now, to conduct a CDA according to Fairclough, there are three stages or dimensions involved in CDA analysis. First of all, text, discursive practice, and sociocultural practice. Now, what do we mean by this? Text. So, this stage deals with the linguistic properties of the text. To be analyzed, this includes text identification, is it a political speech, an interview, a chapter from a biography, okay? And the analysis also in this dimension uh, deals with the word level, like the lexis, the choice of words, the patterns in vocabulary, and the patterns means يعني نسق الكلمات, how do they match together, what do they stand for, all right, the metaphor and rhetoric. So this is all about description of linguistic entities. So in genre, you work on towards text identification. Okay, as we said, is it an interview? Is it a poem? Is it whatever? In the lexicon, we study the rhetorical figures. Okay, the things that make us, that evokes our emotions, the sentiments that make us believe, and so on. The patterns of verbs and nouns, and then we study the topic. What are the most recurrent themes in the text? Then we move on to intertextuality. The intertextuality refers to, those external sources that we bank on or that we depend on when we try to make trust with the audience, and it adds credibility to the speaker. For example, you are writing a I don't know, a speech, and you are quoting from famous leaders, like for example from Al Mukhtar or from T.G. Farrow, so on. This actually makes, even if you are a liar, but this makes your audience believe you, all right? So also repetition structures. This is psychologically has been proven that when you repeat certain words on the ears of people, this actually makes an effect on them. So it creates emphasis. It makes people believe you. So lexicon includes words and phrases that can be analyzed for ideological associations, formality, euphemistic, and metaphorical content. Also the way how sentences are constructed, active, passive, how about the use of imperatives and questions, because they may actually reveal aspects of intended meaning. In discursive practice, that is the second dimension, the interpretation and the analysis is at the text level. The themes here in discursive practice, we are talking about the themes. For example, the text is about racism. The text or the speaker claims for rights of equal treatment, access to public places or areas. So remember that in discursive practice, we are doing a discursive analysis at the thematic level. Then we move on to the sociocultural practice. Here, we are talking about context. You put the text in its historical and social context, and it deals with the relationship between the processes, that is, the production and interpretation, and the social conditioning of the text. Fairclough critical discourse analysis examines the form, structure, and content of discourse
from the grammar and wording employed in its creation to its reception and interpretation or readings by a wider audience. Okay, remember that when we say readings and discourse analysis المقصود ب readings يعني interpretations. Sometimes one text you can have different readings for it. Okay, يعني مرات هو نص واحد مثلا انتم كطلبة كله نعطيكم نفس النص ونقول لكم مثلا حللوا النص هذا بخصوص I don't know مثلا يعني مثلا المطالبات التي يطالب بها المتحدث. لو نعطيكم كل واحد نفس النص كل واحد حيطلع بقراءة مختلفة عن الآخر. اوكي بالرغم من ان مثلا كلكم يعني you're gonna be working on the same data. Okay, but still you're gonna be producing different readings. All right, so the employment of verbs, pronouns and nouns within discourse is as much part of this analysis as the assessment of the content and tone of the discourse. For Clive, the analysis should answer these questions: who is doing what to whom, whose interest the text is serving. يعني when you are working on any textual analysis or discursive analysis, try to make sure that you have answered these questions in the analysis. What power relationships are in play? What ideology is at work? These questions show that CDA focuses on how power is exercised through language. CDA looks at language as a social practice. Who masters the use of language gets everything. So the assumption is that language helps or to create or change, or it can be used to persuade or change behavior, policies, attitudes, history. Language is power. Okay, now these words or the choice actually of our words or the choice of discourse that we adopt is sometimes can be conscious and sometimes it can be unconscious.